And there are people that have severed their ties with the church and say this church has become apostate because this one is doing that and that one is doing the other. And are we sitting with our heads in the sand and say nothing? Are we cowards, etc., etc.? I believe the church is the apple of the Lord's eye. Mm-hmm. And if he loves her, then we should love her too.
Yep.
And if she is not so lovable, then we should ask ourselves, why would God give his life for a not so lovable church?
Yeah.
Is that right?
That's a very good question.
And don't you dare call it Babylon.
No.
And don't you dare call people out of it.
No.
Let's be quite plain about that. Yes. All right. So my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. I was just recently part of a radio interview as to why people leave the church. And why the young people in particular are leaving the church. And that makes you think as to why are they leaving the church? What is the matter? Why are they leaving the church? And then this text comes to mind. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge.
Mm-hmm. But maybe you can just expound a little bit, but what knowledge is referring to? Yeah?
Yes, what do we need to know? What is it that is so important? And, why are we as a denomination in such a prominent position in the world and so different? And why is it so uncomfortable for many to be so different? Mm-hmm. Why is it so necessary to feel accepted by the world when the criteria that God applies are such that he says, separate yourself from the world. So if you love the world, you're an enemy of God, says the Bible.
Exactly.
It's a big problem, right?
It's a big problem. So that must tell you something.
Peer pressure must be one of the reasons.
For sure.
But lack of knowledge. I then spoke to some young people and, just asking some basic things. And I came to the horrifying conclusion that they don't know why we are a remnant.
Yeah.
They don't know what happened in 1844. Oh, there was a disappointment.
That's not the crux.
So you guys got it wrong, right? That's what the world says. They don't understand the prophetic unfolding. They don't understand the 70 weeks. They don't know where we are in the stream of time. They don't understand why the church is in the state or why it's not more like the world.
For sure. I mean, you can actually change the wording from the great disappointment to the great enlightenment. To know that Jesus has walked from the holy to the most holy and are in the judgment seat.
Yes, the time of his judgment has come.
So
what does that mean? And all of these things. And I just thought to myself, with all these accusations flying around and the young people leaving the church, and to me the worst is those that should know better, leaving the church and barking on the outside, come out of her because she's become Babylon. Now, do we deny that there are wrongs in the church?
On the contrary, every citation we point to that you can acknowledge the problems.
There is the problem. But that's not the situation. The situation is this church, what does it stand for? And if there are individuals in the church that do not adhere to what the church stands for, that's not the church that is apostate. That's the individual or the group, even if it is a massive group.
Yes.
That's problematic, right? God's people are to be distinguished as a people who serve him fully, wholeheartedly, taking no honor to themselves and remembering that by a most solemn covenant they've bound themselves to serve the Lord and him only. It is wholehearted, thoroughly decided men and women who will stand now. Christ sifted his followers again and again until at one time there remained only 11 and a few faithful women to lay the foundations of the Christian church. Is there going to be a sifting?
Was there a sifting like we've just seen here with the 12 disciples?
There are those who will stand back when burdens are to be borne, but when the church is all aglow, they catch the enthusiasm, sing and shout and become rapturous. But watch them. When the fervor is gone, only a few faithful Calebs will come to the front and display unwavering principle. We're in a crucible. We have to wait for the Calebs and the Joshuas to manifest themselves. No man can succeed in the service of God unless his whole heart is in the work. And he counts all things but loss for excellency of the knowledge of Christ. No man who makes any reserve can be the disciple of Christ, much less can he be his co-laborer. All right, so in this crucible, God has a people, and he is sifting them.
Yeah.
He is shaking them. So can you say, okay, I accept the Sabbath, but I refuse the health reform?
No. Because of the
Martin,
package.
You're being fanatical.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so there's been a sifting. Then you also have to keep a spirit humble as that of a little child. Envy, pride, worldly ambition, cupidity, love of ease must be sacrificed upon the altar of duty. But these are character changes that must take place. And then she asks, oh, for faithful Calebs in this age of the world. We want men and women who have self-control, who have moral worth, who love and fear God. Men who cherish personal piety, firm religious principles. God is dishonored by a lack of moral stamina. And many who profess to be Christians, they seem to be only half converted. They claim to believe the truth, but they love the luxuries which are so injurious to health better than they love the Jesus of the truth. They want an optional accessory. They don't want this portion. Were the Israel of old in that category?
Oh, for sure. They murmured quite a bit.
Who were the worst amongst them?
The mixed multitude.
The mixed multitude. Fortunately, we don't have a mixed multitude.
I think we're all about
I've got news for you. We are the mixed multitude. And, eating and drinking are carried on to excess. That Christ mentioned this condition of things in the last days. Martin, likening it to the condition of the world before the flood, Christ would have his followers cultivate undeviating principle. It is necessary for the Christian in thought, word, and action to shun everything that leads to sin. Martin, do we do that as a church?
No.
And some try to do it.
And you see, that's the thing to remember. Here and in the testimonies, it's talking directly to you as an individual.
All right.
And that is what, it's not your purpose to enforce all of that on the others.
All right, so let's just get to the bottom line. Are we going to have people that rebel against health reform?
Yes.
Right? There's the highest reason for us to prize the truth Sabbath and stand in its defense, for it is the sign which distinguishes the people of God from the world. The commandment that the world makes void is the one to which for this reason God's people will give greater honor. It is when the unbelieving cast contempt upon the word of God that the faithful Calebs are called for. Now, most people within this church are there because they believe the Sabbath, right?
Yeah.
Now, I spoke to an editor of one of our magazines, and I asked him, because he was very liberal, why do you keep a Sabbath? And he said, because I was born an Adventist. So I said, okay, if you were born a Catholic, would you keep Sunday? He said, yes.
Yeah.
I said, doesn't it make any difference to you? He said, no. So I said, well, why do you keep it then? He says, because this is what I was born into. This is what I know. Is it important to you? He says, no, it doesn't matter which day you keep. This is an Adventist speaking. Now, he represents a huge group because he was the editor of one of our magazines.
Yeah.
Should I now leave the church because this individual was talking such utter nonsense?
No, actually, you should say, Lord, help him, forgive him, because he know not what he do.
That's right. And the other representative of a very prominent nation was holding up his little trinket there, and somebody asked him, what is that? He said, this is for my martini. Now, Martin, should I leave the church because he thinks drinking martinis is fun?
No.
Okay. But what did Caleb experience? He saw the stones in the hands of those that had brought a false report. But this did not deter him. He had a message and he would bear it. The same spirit will be manifested today to those who are true to God. Martin, if you preach truth, straight truth, will there be stones in other people's hands?
Constantly. The whole time.
Did Caleb leave the church because of it?
Exactly. No, he went into the desert with them for 40 years. And then after into Canaan.
And he said, give me this mountain with these giants, I'll take it. And off he went.
That's a very beautiful one. So instead of getting out of the church and barking, say, give me these mountains, these apostates, I'll go and talk to them.
I will go and sort them out. And if they bother you, I will take them away with my sword. So Martin, we have these situations. The prophet Malachi says, behold, I will send Elijah, the prophet, before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And he shall turn the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to their fathers. So Martin, is there a message that is supposed to touch the heart?
Yeah. The whole message is supposed to touch your heart.
All right. Now, if there is a message, is that a guarantee that all hearts will be reached?
No. We've got numerous examples of this the whole time.
Okay, so because it doesn't happen, you're going to leave the church.
That's exactly why you should not leave the church.
All right. So here the prophet describes the character of the work. Those who are to prepare the way for the second coming of Christ are represented by faithful Elijah. As John came in the spirit of Elijah, so must the end-time church come in the spirit of Elijah. And as John the Baptist ate a pure plant-based diet, and as Daniel, as a type of the end-time people, said, give me pulse to eat, which is a plant-based diet, we should avoid all health-destroying habits of those who live in this degenerate age. Mm-hmm. Do you agree with that?
Oh, for sure. You should stand out.
You should stand out. All right, Martin, then why are we worse than Israel of old?
Because we adhere to Revelation 14, verse 6 to 12 instead of Revelation.
All right, Martin, so here we have, let's call it an enacted parable. Or if you want to, you can call it a political cartoon.
Yeah.
And basically, you're addressing God's people and saying, we're worse than they. Yeah. But let's say we are worse than they, rather than you are worse than they.
Exactly.
Because we are all Laodicea.
When Daniel prayed and asked for forgiveness, did he say they?
No, he said we. We have sinned. Martin, now, this little picture over here actually speaks 1,000 words, because here they're sitting at potluck and they have the roasted whatevers before them, and I don't think these drinks down here are necessarily the best. Some of them could possibly be
martinis
in some cases. Definitely in some churches it could be coffee, which is called a sin in some places. But it can also be power drinks or whatever. And here on the church it says Sad Day Church. That's a scrambling of SDA. Rearranging the words, the letters, to read Sad Day Church. Now, Martin, Israel of old, did they crave the flesh pots of Egypt?
Yes, they were murmuring.
Murmuring and muttering. And they said, nothing but this manna. We loathe this food. Did they say that?
Yes.
And did the Lord then give them what they wanted?
Yes.
And when they moaned again, did he give it again?
Yes.
Did they get sick?
No, worse than that.
All right. And while the flesh was still between their teeth, they received a wasting disease. So, Martin, they got it on occasion. But our people can get it whenever they want to, every single day. And they make sure they do. Don't they?
Yes,
So are we better or worse than they?
worse than they.
Worse than they. All right. Health foods are to be manufactured in Kuranbong and are to be sent out to every place where the standard of truth is uplifted. The secular papers are dealing with the question of the cattle that are brought to the market diseased. Out of 20 cattle, only 1 or 2 are pronounced fit for consumption. This is arousing the reasoning mind. What can be done to take the place of flesh meat, the people ask. This is our time to work in proper lines, to go forth in the spirit of Elijah and prepare the way for the Lord. Are we doing that as a people?
No.
Are some doing it?
Yes. And they are being ostracized.
Okay. Do we have a war every potluck?
Yeah,
There's a war, right?
that's it.
Now, Martin, God put them on a healthy diet because he wanted to restrict them and punish them, right?
Yeah, I didn't want the best for them. He just wanted
No, he
to
didn't want the
let them
best for
suffer.
them. In case people don't know, we're being sarcastic.
Yes.
No, he said, I don't want to put any of the diseases that the Egyptians had upon you. And look, when you adhere to my principles because I gave them to you, there was not one feeble one amongst you. In fact, your clothes didn't even wear out, let alone your bodies.
Yeah.
In
And
the
he-
last days, isn't it going to be the same?
The same. And he mentioned it quite a few times. He wanted them to have clarity of mind.
Yes, when I was still at the university, I took my students once a year. I took the students to the abattoir. And Martin, for at least a week after that experience, they were all vegetarians. Because the carcasses came down that line and the inspectors would be standing in a row and the carcass would come by open and there would be a huge tumor in the one and they would cut it out, throw it into a bin. All of these diseased portions, they would just cut them out. And if the rest looked okay, it got a stamp, prime, and off it went.
Yeah.
And so they came down the line with cancer, with tumors, with the worst situations. And it really had to be horrendous before it was classed second class or whatever meat. And all of the bad, rotten portions went into a bin. What do you think happened to those?
It gets processed.
Gets processed and fed back to the animals. And God said to these end-time people, disease is increasing in proportion to the wickedness of man.
Yeah, and the curse of the earth.
And I want to protect you against this. And please, I want you to warn the people. Please be an Elijah for me. Please be an example like Daniel was. And everybody says, whatever you have said, Lord, we will do. That's what Israel said.
The same.
Didn't they say it when they were baptized?
Yes. They said it right after they received the 10 Commandments from Moses as well.
Okay, are we going to leave the church because
They went,
the majority don't want to do it?
no.
Okay.